You set foot on foreign soil. Only this land isn't ruled by any country or government. In this land we celebrate music. In this land we celebrate games. In this land we celebrate those who compose video game music. Welcome to the VG Embassy. Welcome and thanks for tuning in to another episode of the VG Embassy. This is a show centered around video game music and the amazing online community of fans and podcasters that enjoy it. My name's Ed, and on each episode I'll take the role of Prime VGM Minister and invite a guest VG Ambassador onto the show to share with us their own video game music culture, or I may share a part of my culture on a solo show. Welcome, one and all. This is a particularly challenging episode of the VG Embassy because my guest VG Ambassador today is one Dan Laughton, who has been here and there and everywhere in the VGM community for quite a while. I remember him from being a very early listener to my old show, Pixel Tunes Radio, and it's about time that we finally got you hanging out with me and talking about some games. So how are you, Dan? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing fabulous. I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to talk about some great music and some great games.
Awesome. So I said this is a challenging episode specifically because we're going to be talking about challenging games. And so a little anecdote. I know Dan and I have a lot of really opposing opinions on things as far as gaming goes. It seems like every time there's a conversation on like the VGM podcast fans Facebook group or the Rhythm and Pixels Facebook group, he and I will almost always be on opposite sides. But the one thing I love about you, Dan, is that you're always respectful, even though we can not see eye to eye on everything. You respect what I say and I respect what you say, and there's never any sort of like putting anybody down, and that's such a rare thing to find on the internet nowadays. So I really appreciate that, and because of that, a lot of what you've said, even though it wasn't necessarily my opinion to begin with, I'm more open to coming around to your way of thinking. So I really do appreciate that. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show, because Challenging Games is a show that I would probably never do otherwise. I'm the kind of gamer that really likes to, I guess people call it a tourist gamer. They kind of like to saunter through video game worlds, see what the developers have to offer, listen to the music, not necessarily spend lots and lots of time getting really, really into the gameplay and devising ways to beat really difficult bosses. Like, I've never really been interested in that, but that's kind of what seems to drive you when you play games, right, Dan?
Yeah, it definitely is, and that's what I find interesting about our conversations, because lately I've been playing Sekiro, which is... it makes the Dark Souls games look like a tutorial in terms of its level of difficulty. So that's something that actually really excites me, and whatever it is that I figure out these boss patterns after like the 500th time, I'm like, oh my god, take that, you piece of trash. I can't believe you tried to mess with me even though they pummeled me over and over again. There's something about that I just feel so satisfied by at the end, because if I just sort of play the same level where it's like, okay, here's the kind of touristy casual thing, I'm going to start running out of money because I'm going to beat games far too quickly. So this is a budgetary thing. I'm being fiscally responsible here. That
is actually a very good point, because I do have a lot of games on Steam, and it's probably because I go through a lot of very easy games very quickly. But was there any sort of catalyst for really enjoying challenging games? Like, did you get a particular, sense of self-satisfaction beating a really hard game when you were a kid and you wanted to chase that feeling? Or how did that all come about?
That actually did come about as a result of a couple of games when I was growing up, and one of them in particular was Super C. And there was something about that game, and I remember first turning it on and being so blown away by it because I'd be playing Mario and these other easy games that it's like, okay, this is kind of casual fun. And then when I tried time and time again and could not get past the first level of Super C, just something inside of me was like, okay, you have to do this. And then when I finally got past that after, I don't know how many hundreds of deaths, finally get to the second level and I feel invincible and then I die immediately and there goes all my continues kind of thing.
Oh, man.
That was one of the first games that I remember where I started to find that drive where it's like, okay, there's something satisfying about being able to actually overcome this, because then when somebody else comes over or you see somebody else playing the game and they're struggling, you're just kind of casually like, okay, yeah, I don't know anything about this game kind of thing.
Right.
And it actually had come up when a friend of mine got the NES Classic, and that was one of the games on there. Everybody was mad about Contra not being on there, but I grew up on Super C, so I was excited. He had no idea that I could play this game, and he brought it to me and said, like, okay, you know what? I've been struggling with this. Can you give it a go? And then I did a no death run for him right there, and he's like, so you've played it before? I'm like, no.
I was born this way,
yeah.
you know.
I do that with every difficult game. It's just the way that it goes.
Do you find that it takes a really long time for you to get good at stuff? Or are you like the first couple times you play it, are you already really starting to get into like no death runs and stuff?
I think it really depends on the type of game, because there are certain ones where I just jump into right away. Like, take for example, when I first started Demon's Souls, and From Software is one of my favorite companies, and Demon's Souls really solidified that. I struggled a lot with that game, but once I got familiar with the mechanics, I felt like the game was really fair. And as I got familiar with the types of patterns and the way that things were going, when I got to Dark Souls 2, I found it very liberating and like, woo, look at me, look how good I am, because it actually took me about halfway through the game for me to actually experience my first death when I first played it.
Wow.
But then there are certain games like I was playing Yakuza Kiwami, and there are rhythm game sections in that. And you would think that I am the worst player at video games when I get to rhythm games, and it took me forever to be able to actually finally get through the completion checklist and actually complete all these rhythm games, because I am so embarrassingly bad at them. But you get me more in like the action games, like the third-person hack and slashes, and the platformers and the shmups. I can do really well. Like, people are usually really surprised at how quickly I can master bullet hells, because they are one of my absolute favorite genres to go through. I think they're so fun and just really intense, and once you get used to the format, I feel like you can do a lot better really quickly, just if you start picking up on some traits and some patterns and characteristics of that type of genre.
Cool. So conversely, my opposite experience as a kid was going to Toys R Us with my grandfather, my brother and my grandfather when I was a kid, and seeing the Game Genie there on the shelf and my grandfather going, hey, you know, what's this? This is less money than a regular video game. You seem to be interested in it. Do you want it? And my brother and I were like, yeah, of course. So taking it home and then learning about cheating through games, and we were, my parents just like to keep us occupied on the weekends, and the way they did that was just to take us to Blockbuster almost every Friday night and rent a new game. So we had like lots of games to try out and return, and then we had the Game Genie to kind of like get through them every single weekend. So that kind of just became my traditional way to play games. I just really like to see everything it had to offer, not worry about getting good at it. And then also, I kind of have a hacker mentality. I like to modify just about every device I get. I love the feeling of plugging in random Game Genie codes to a game to see what glitches out, or, you know, does gravity change, or modifying a specific code. I find that kind of challenge really cool, too, to see if I could decipher what kind of codes will make different things happen in a game and maybe get to some sort of a result that I'm looking for based on kind of deciphering what these codes do. So I do like a challenge. It's just a challenge that the developers of the game aren't necessarily putting forth to the gamer. I'm kind of making my own challenges, I guess. How many games can I cheat my way through this year?
I can actually appreciate that, because I think all of us, every once in a while, regardless of how we experience games, we want to feel like a god in a video game. And once we get some sort of like a debug mode, or you hack it or do whatever it is, and you just are invincible and can absolutely decimate everything, there's something fun about that every now and then.
Yeah. And so my challenging game picks this episode are going to be maybe a little more unorthodox than yours, but I promise they're all here for a reason, and I'll let you guys know what it is as we go through the show. So speaking of that, Dan, what did you pick for your first track for the day?
So the first track I picked is actually from the first Mega Man game that I ever played, and that is Hornet Man from Mega Man 9, and it's basically on every platform from the Wii onwards, starting on 2008, and it is from Hiroki Isogai.
All right, well, let's take a listen. We'll be right back. So that was Hornet Man from Mega Man 9, composed by Hiroki Isogai. So Ed, what did you think of that track? Well, the first thing I thought of when I heard it was, wow, this sounds a lot like Mega Man 2, which is fantastic because that's my favorite Mega Man soundtrack. I played Mega Man 9 when it first came out. I remember it making huge waves when it was originally released on WiiWare because it was a throwback to the old Mega Man games that I remember on the NES so well, and I loved the music. And I played it for a bit and kind of immediately lost interest in it and just never went back to it. Same thing with Mega Man 10. I played it for a little bit when it came out, lost interest again. So it was nice to kind of come back to this soundtrack. It was like listening to it for the first time all over again. I know as we were talking while we were listening to the music that you said it reminded you a lot of the Crash Man stage from Mega Man 2, and I completely agree. It's got that da-da-da, 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 da-da-da. It's that really kind of happy, very upbeat kind of cadence to it. Crash Man was my favorite song from Mega Man 2, so this kind of having a lot of influences from that makes it all the better.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about how you can still take that track seriously and still really enjoy it, and it just has this, like, a little bit of intensity, but there's still a lot of that light-hearted kind of flutteriness that just makes you really get into the moment and feel really good about things, which is really great because this stage is awful in terms of its challenge, and this was actually the first Mega Man game that I had ever played, and this was the stage that gave me the most trouble, which was a part of the inspiration for picking the track. On top of loving it, but I love the whole soundtrack. It's just an incredible soundtrack. I think that they had a really diverse, rounded bit of composers to be able to really do something that was really special and really bring Mega Man back. And after I had played this game for the first time, being my first Mega Man game, I quickly rectified that mistake and went back and played all of the other Mega Man games and have since absolutely fallen in love with them. So it was really nice to be able to kind of think about this for the episode, because I sometimes forget how enjoyable this and some of the other tracks are because I can beat this game so quickly now. I don't even think about the stuff in the background. I actually start timing things based on certain sound cues and everything like that because I can speedrun it and not really think about what's going on. So to really sit down, listen to the notes and think about, wow, they just knocked this soundtrack out of the park is wonderful.
Yeah. So my question to you is, having played these games kind of in reverse order from most retro gamers out there, how did you feel about the difficulty of the older games versus Mega Man 9? Did you start with Mega Man 2 and be like, oh my god, this is totally easy? Or did they give you a little bit of a challenge because they didn't play just like Mega Man 9 did? Or
I honestly felt that this set the bar in terms of difficulty, so everything else past this was a little bit easier. The only one that actually gave me a little bit more trouble was actually Mega Man 7, and I honestly can't explain why, because I don't think it's a particularly difficult game. It's just something about that one kind of, maybe it was just the graphical change and I just was not prepared for that. I'm not entirely too sure, but Mega Man 9 I honestly think is the hardest one out there. Even with Mega Man 10's hard mode, I still think that Mega Man 9 is more difficult. But I feel like it's one of those games that really balances difficulty really well. I didn't feel like it was cheap. I was never frustrated by any sort of surprise deaths or anything like that. I feel like it's a really well composed, really well thought out game. I really like that you're able to utilize each of the weapons for multiple different things, whether you be speedrunning or just wanting to make other platforms or just make life easier for yourself. I felt like they had a really well-rounded weapon set and bosses that just made this an absolute pleasure to be able to play, and I'm really glad that this was actually my first Mega Man game, and it's also a game that I got for free as well, which was just all the things in one that was absolutely wonderful, because I used to actually beat games for people. They would pay me to get achievements on their account. And there was one game that was really quick and easy for me to be able to beat, and somebody messaged me and said, okay, can you beat Overlord 2 multiplayer for me? And I said yes, in exchange for Mega Man 9. Because after I played the demo, I was absolutely hooked, and I had a blast with this game. And this is one of those games where I actually go back to it more often just because of how much I love the soundtrack. The gameplay is great, but really the soundtrack is the highlight for me. Yeah,
you do bring up a good point about when you die in Mega Man, it's because it's your own fault. And I think that's what makes challenging games more easy to play and to keep going through, especially when you know it's your own mistake when you die. If a game is programmed in a way where there's just a random chance of you dying regardless of you trying to do a screen or a level the same way every time, that makes that just so much more frustrating. And I've seen a lot of speedrunners go through a game several times during a night just because when they start a level, if an enemy's not on the right block, or if a bird's not in the right place to swoop down on you, you lose your time or you lose your life. And I guess having a predictable set of enemies and a predictable set of patterns makes it a lot easier for speedrunners and people who enjoy getting good at really hard games.
Yeah, and I feel like it's one of those things where it makes for a much more compelling and interesting and fun experience when the game gives you a set of rules and actually abides by them. Because I think about poor game design with something like, say, Battletoads, which is notoriously difficult, and I can beat that game, but I think it's a stellar example of what poor game design is, because aside from the limited continues, let's just say hypothetically you have unlimited continues, there's never any particular level that will give you a set of rules that will help you with a later level. You have to relearn everything every time you go to a new level, and everything is just agonizing in terms of learning the game, because it just does not play fair. Whereas I think if you learn the patterns of how a Mega Man game works, you can really apply those skills that you've acquired to other games. And I feel like starting with Mega Man 9, which I feel is the most difficult one in the series, going back to the earlier ones, I had a much easier time with it, and I found it a lot more enjoyable because the game generally played by the rules most of the time. I mean, 1 isn't a great example of that, but 2 onwards I feel like was really fair and consistent in terms of the game quality and design to really make the player feel immersed and have an enjoyable experience.
Right, yeah. I mean, when a game plays by the rules, when you enter a level or enter a room, you can envision exactly what you're going to do before you do it. And when a game doesn't play by the rules or has a very loose set of rules, you're playing more of a reactive game instead of a proactive game. So I can imagine it's going to be much more difficult for somebody who's trying to speedrun.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's move on to our next track. This is a pick of mine. This is probably one of the only really traditionally challenging games I've got on this show, but it's one of my favorites, and I love the soundtrack too. This is a track called Clock Tower from the game Dead Cells. This came out on PC, Switch, and PS4 in 2017, composed by Johan Laulin. Tick-tock, that was Clock Tower from Dead Cells. That came out on the PC, Switch, and PS4 in 2017, composed by Johan Laughton. And he is a French composer from Bordeaux, France. And he describes his music as, sometimes my cat walks over a keyboard and things happen.
I love that.
But I think his music is a little bit more than just cats walking over a keyboard. I love this soundtrack, and it's one of those games where you're going to be hearing the music from each of these levels so often that they're going to have to be good, or else you're going to completely lose your mind. And we've talked about this game actually a lot on Embassy Exclusive, the Patreon version of this show, because Joe and Todd and I have all played this game and really enjoyed it. And I haven't really talked about it too much on the proper podcast, so I wanted to pick a track from this just because it kind of deserves some spotlight on the public show. And God, the way this begins with those little tick-tocks and then builds into this, like, all those timpani drums in the background and the slight flamenco guitar over it, and just goes in so many different directions. It's even hard to kind of describe in like a sentence the feel of this song. What did you think, Dan?
First off, I'm so happy that you picked this track, because my goodness, it was so good. I really think that this is just one of those tracks that highlights what a talented composer should exemplify, because I really like that you had these multiple really complex layers that really worked well as independent of one another, but then put together still created something that was very harmonious and just really desirable to listen to. Like that guitar being just ever so present in the background, not being something that completely dominates the track, but still gives you enough of that rhythm, that melody to be able to just kind of keep you going. You notice it, but it's not overpowering like many guitars are in a lot of tracks that we listen to. And everything about this track is just so glorious, and it says a lot about a game's music if listening to the music alone makes you want to pick up this game. And this is totally 100% a purchase for me now as a result of just this song alone, because
awesome.
My goodness, it is this phenomenal.
Then I'll consider it mission complete, because one of the reasons I picked this track too is because I wanted to turn you on to this game, because I think knowing your tastes in games, you're really going to enjoy this one. Just the other thing I wanted to mention is that this is almost all guitar work, and guitar and string instruments used in so many different ways. You've got the really low-strung, like, desperado bum, ba-da-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-da-da, and then the very pretty kind of flamenco style over it, and you get some other kind of, like, really low bass tones in there, and it's just, it feels like an orchestra of guitars, almost. It's got such a depth to it, and that's a really unique sound that you don't really hear even in like movie soundtracks, never mind game soundtracks. So I think this guy's got a lot of talent, and I'm really looking forward to hearing stuff that he composes in the future. I
think it's really impressive when somebody can take a bass track and make it dominant like that and make it something that's really enjoyable to listen to, because it's so often that it's just kind of rhythm. If you're really paying attention, you can hear it in the background, but that's a really prominent bass, and it is just phenomenal.
Yeah. So a little bit about the game. Clock Tower is a procedurally generated, I gotta call it like, it's one part Metroid, one part like Symphony of the Night, one part maybe like Ninja Warriors, one part Ninja Gaiden. It's a combination of so many different. Suffice it to say, it's a side-scrolling weapons-based combat game, and you are increasing your skill set as you go through the game in a roguelike fashion to get to the end. There is an actual physical end boss and end to this game. It's not just endless randomly generated dungeons. There are levels too. So you start off in a prison cell. You're this little green slimy thing that kind of crawls over to this headless body that's laying on the ground, and then the body animates, and so your green slimy thing is basically your character's head. and the body comes alive. I guess kind of like Earthworm Jim with a green slug instead of a worm.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah, it's a little more not as tongue-in-cheek as Earthworm Jim is, but there's a little bit of humor in this game too. But anyways, your mission is to destroy the warden of this prison island that you're stuck on and attempt to escape the island. And in doing so, you're going through several different levels. You're learning a little bit about the characters on the island that are running this prison, or the like the royalty that you end up fighting against towards the end. I don't want to spoil too much, but there are a million different weapons, a million different defensive mechanisms, a million different traps you can spring. You can customize your character in so many different ways, from game's inception to game's end, that I don't think any two characters will ever have the same skills as people beat the game. It's incredible the amount of ways you can customize your character. You can find exactly the combination of weapons and defensive and tactical items that you like that play to your strengths. And then you can get different challenges and achievement challenges by using specifically different weapons or different loadouts and beating the game in those ways. There's 4 run-throughs of the game total that you can do. Beating the game for reals is beating the boss the 4th time, the last boss. And I've beaten it 3 out of the 4 times. I don't know anybody else aside from, master speedrunners that have beaten it 4 times. I don't know a lot of people that have beaten it 1 time. That's how difficult the game is. But something about this game just caught me, and I clicked with it really, really well, and just learned how to play the game. And I didn't analyze it, like you might do, Dan. I just somehow felt like synergy with the gameplay. It just felt like it was built for my style of gameplay, and I found just really easy ways to get in and get out of situations and destroy characters or kill enemies without even getting near them. So I don't know. I feel like this is one of those games that I'm going to be going back to over and over and over again, because it feels like putty in my hands. It's just such a joy to play. And I really recommend anyone out there who likes fast side-scrolling combat games to check this one out, because it flows like absolute butter. It's so much fun.
I absolutely adore when you get to the point where you just feel like you're connected, you're one with the game, and it just totally flows like that. I didn't think that, given how often we disagree on so many things with respect to gaming, that you would have sold me so hard on this game. Because top-notch salesmanship right here. I am absolutely enthralled, buying this right away. Love it.
Awesome. Well, I did work at Funcoland and GameStop for years and years and years, so if I can do one thing, I can sell a video game. And the nice thing about this game is that it's on Switch, too, so it's really nice to be able to kind of take out on my front porch and just play portably, and then stick it in my TV and then play that way. And the characters are small on the screen, but the color palette is so rich and vibrant that even on a smaller screen, even if you're playing in sunlight, you can still pretty easily tell what's going on. Just from top to bottom, art, gameplay, programming, music. This game is just so well polished. It's hard for me to even find a flaw that I could even express on this show.
But maybe we'll just call it a perfect game. I think we're too quick to start jumping on the let's try and find what's wrong with the let's try and find what's negative.
You're totally
it's just
right.
A perfect game. Maybe you just love it. There we go. Don't need to change a thing.
Exactly. So, with that said, I can't get any worse than that. What do you have for your next track?
So up next, I have a track from a game that I just discovered a few days before we were recording this episode, and that is Pathology from a game called Paddlebox. It is on Steam, Switch, PS4, and Vita, and it was released this year, and it was composed by Contraval.
All right, I saw a little bit of footage of this game on YouTube when it just released, and it looks really interesting, so I can't wait to talk about it. We'll be right back.
Okay, so we are back. That was Pathology from Paddlebox, and that was composed by Contraval, which is actually a Mexican band, and this is the only thing they've ever composed in terms of the video game sense. They're all very talented musicians who have come from all sorts of places, but their video game debut.
Neat.
And this is a track that I fell in love with the moment that I listened to it. Like, it is just phenomenal. And one of the things that I really appreciate about it is that it really coincides with what's actually going on in the game at that point in time. I'll try and remove as many spoilers as possible, but as you are going through this particular fight, those low periods where it's just more of that little bit of a bass beat that doesn't have too many layers to it, it is more of like this quick little dodging game where you are actually dodging to the beat of the percussion in the background. And they don't mean it in the sense that it's supposed to be like a rhythm game, but you just sort of get into this natural flow where it's like, okay, I have to dodge here, block here, and you really go to that beat of the percussion. And I think it worked really well, and I didn't realize until I really paid attention to it that that's actually what I started doing. I was paying attention to how I was fighting based on the sound cues. I think being able to have a video game soundtrack actually coincide with the gameplay and the two of them be meaningfully playing off of one another is such an impressive thing to do, and it really helps with that immersiveness and really getting into the flow of the game. And once it transforms into that really upbeat, intense track component of the track, it really is a like intense part of the fight, and it's really exciting because you just start getting into the rhythm and you just want to just beat that boss, but also at the same time you're kind of doing it to a rhythm, which is so weird to do. And each time you go through the layers of this track, when it goes up and then when it goes back down, the fight slightly changes in a way, and so does the song, which I think is impressive to have these subtle cues that coincide with the gameplay that totally change as the fight goes on. And once you get to the end when he's really beaten up, things just intensify that much more and you get that little extra layer to the track, and it is just really something to experience. I fell in love with this game immediately, everything about it. So what are your thoughts on the track?
That is just one of those things where you just slap your forehead and you're like, why the hell didn't I think of that? Like Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, Super Punch-Out, they're so rhythm-based when you think about it. And you're like, why not put that to some sort of musical soundtrack that's in time with the box? Like, boom! Like, that's such an awesome idea. These guys are brilliant. And knowing that this cool song is like literally a boxing song just makes it that much better. You know, I was going to comment on how compared to the Clock Tower track from Dead Cells that we just listened to, this is a very simple, almost like, you know, you got your percussion and maybe two or three distinct instruments, as opposed to that, you know, very in-depth cinematic piece we just listened to, but it has that same sense of immersion that Clock Tower did, doing so much less, but knowing that that immersion also includes gameplay elements makes it that much better. So all around that just impresses me even more. And even though there are only a couple instruments in this song, I love how textured those synths are, and they sound so big and enormous. And compared to the kind of simple black and white graphics this game has, the music must stand out even more so than it does, you know, like listening while you're walking down the street or driving somewhere, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. There's something about the contrast with the music to the simplicity in the graphics that just really makes them stand out that much more. I mean, it's just a stellar soundtrack to listen to even without the context of the game, but in the context, it really highlights how impressive these compositions are and how talented these musicians are, because you're right in saying that it's quite simple in terms of its composition. It's just a pleasure to listen to, though. And to be able to take something simple and not have a ton of layers and a lot of complexity to it, but still really drive you and get you excited, I think is really impressive and commendable. But again, it just shows how these are individuals who are definitely musicians. This is not their first swing at this kind of thing, and I really did intend for that pun to get included in there. Because for those who don't know, this is a boxing game, and it is totally black and white, and you are following a duck, which I didn't know what to think of this game, and I didn't even intend to actually have it in my possession. I traded it with somebody. Somebody said, oh, it's a boxing adventure about a duck. You want to give it a go? And I'm like, sure, that sounds fun.
Sounds like a fever dream.
Yeah, something about it. And once you start getting into it, like, it does not take you long to just get hooked on the story, because they sink you they set you right into something that's really intense story-wise, and you're like, oh, I have to get to the bottom of this. And to have it where you kind of have this a little bit of an adventure mode paired with these really rhythmic, intense boxing matches where each of the bosses has their own little flavor. Like, this one has you going based on this kind of like techno beat machine that you're fighting along with this boss, and then other ones there's like chefs and like something from like this like gun house kind of vibe to it. They're all over the place, and each of them has their own little patterns and are really fun to fight. So I feel like you can not really get bored. If you are sold in this concept, you are definitely not going to get bored with playing this game, because it has a lot of flavor to it that's all over the place, and I highly recommend this for anybody who wants something like Punch-Out but with a totally different flair to it.
Yeah, man, you sold me. As a fan of Punch-Out and rhythm games, this hits both those buttons. So I'm definitely sold. I want to check this one out. One question that I had, I don't know if you know the answer to this. Do you know if the music in the game is dynamic, or does the music follow this pattern every single time and the game just follows along with the music?
There's actually a little bit of both. There are certain times where they have a lot of control over the situation and they want you to experience things in a particular way, but other times it's dynamic and kind of goes with the flow with what's going on. So they really balance that quite a bit.
Okay, cool. So they must set up the music in blocks then and just kind of rearrange the blocks instead of having different instruments on different levels. Just trying to like picture in my head, because you can do dynamic music in so many different ways with stems or with patterns, and it sounds like it's a little more pattern based than stem based, but that's really cool.
And so even when you go with this track that we just listened to, if you are making mistakes in the fight, or if it draws on a little bit longer, there are certain loops that it goes through, so you're not forced to go on. So you have these patterns that start to play. So they really did put them in very strategic blocks, so it feels like this natural flow, and I think it's really well done.
That's really cool. Very, very cool. Yeah, I want to check this one out for sure. From you know, like, screenshots, I don't think really do it justice, because like I said, the graphics they're very black and white. They look kind of like that old Wii game Mad World.
Yes.
Where it looks like newsprint basically, but it's fully 3D. I thought it was just a 2D kind of sprite-based game, but you actually do have some third-person like adventure mode where you're wandering around buildings and stuff. It just overall it just looks really, really cool and very, very unique. So I want to check this one out for sure. All right, are you ready to move on to our next one?
Oh, I am absolutely ready.
All right, so this is one that is not a obscure title at all. Definitely a challenging one, though, and one of my favorites. Now, I need to make sure, Dan, before we move on, have you taken any Xanax or muscle relaxers before we listen to this track?
No, thankfully.
Okay, good, because I would definitely lose you if you have.
I'm not familiar with the game too much, but I do know that this is going to be very seizure-inducing in terms of a track.
Maybe the opposite way. We'll find out. This is Horse Steppin' from Hotline Miami. This came out on the PC, PS3, PS4, Vita, etc. Composed by Sun Arrow. Try to stay awake, boys and girls. Wake up, boys and girls. That was Horse Steppin' from Hotline Miami. Came out on the PC, PS3, PS4, the Vita, lots and lots of consoles. And that was composed by Sun Arrow. And I threw Dan for a loop because he was expecting some of the really high-energy stuff that Hotline Miami is kind of well known for. And this is a track that plays like during the title screen and the menu screen, and I think in your apartment between levels. And it is so chill. And I felt like we were going to have a lot of kind of stressful music in this episode, so like halfway through I wanted to kind of have a little calm down and relax a little bit before we get back into some more high-energy stuff. What'd you think of this one, Dan?
I don't know. I think I fell asleep during it. No, it's totally one of those songs that I can see playing in the background during certain things to just totally get you into a mood just to relax and just sort of feel like one with the waves and one with the world kind of thing. Like it's just, it has a balance between almost being melancholic, but also just a really chill, make you feel good kind of track. And I found this to be quite a relaxing, very enjoyable track.
Yeah, the relaxivity in this track is just so deliberate. Like, even the percussion is just a little bit delayed. It just sounds a little bit off, but for some reason it just makes it sound even more, like, sloppy. Like, the drummer's like, all right, I'm doing the drum thing, fine. I really just want to lay back and smoke this doob.
Yeah, he wakes up every now and then, and, oh yeah, I'm the drummer, and then he kind of gets back on it, hits it a couple of times, and then kind of dozes off again, and never to be seen or heard from again. And
the vocalist is like, I'm just going to turn the reverb and the chorus all the way up and just let it do all the work for me. I'm just going to sing some random syllables in the microphone. Like, I almost feel like just the band is like ready to fall asleep too, and this is just like a lullaby they're playing for themselves to get themselves to sleep. It's that chill.
Yeah.
Complete diametric opposite to this game, though. This game is utterly insane. Now you've never played this one before?
I have not.
Okay.
No.
So, I started playing this game the wrong way. I started playing this game like it was an action title, which is what it presents itself to be. once I started looking at it as a puzzle game, things really clicked. So the game is an overhead perspective, and through the machinations of the story, most of your objective in this game is to enter a building, perform some sort of an action, which is either kill everybody, kill a specific target, take something without getting caught or seen, etc., and get back out of the building again. And it's one-hit kill. Enemies have lightning-fast reflexes. You usually start off with no weapons or a stick or something, you know, just really, really ineffective. And you're basically, as a gamer, as a player, is to figure out the best route through this building. And it's lots and lots of trial and error, because you have to map your way through, you have to figure out which enemies are going to react first. If you even step into the sight of an enemy and he's got a gun, it's an instant shot, instant kill. It's not like bullet hell bullets where they like slowly flow across the screen. It's just real-time bullet speed. You're dead if you cross that line. So the whole object of the game is really puzzle-like. You have to figure out how to get through these rooms in a way that you can get the drop on every single enemy in the level and get back out of the building. And once I figured that out, it became a lot of fun. And I started looking at it as more of a puzzle, and every time I died, it wasn't necessarily, holy crap, I died because I suck at this game. It was, no, I just didn't figure this puzzle out yet. What are the next steps in this puzzle? And I'll get halfway through the building, and then I'll die, and I'll have to remember exactly how to get through the building, and then get to that point and figure out what my next step was. So you kind of build your route step by step by step until you're finally have the whole thing planned out, and then you can run through the level as many times as you want and not get killed. So it was really enjoyable. It was really kind of a surprise. I thought I was just going to be playing kind of a top-down Grand Theft Auto 1 or 2 style action shooter, and instead I got something that was a lot more cerebral than how it presented itself. So I really enjoyed it. Is this like the kind of game that you think you might enjoy?
I'm not entirely too sure about that. I feel like this game would actually kind of frustrate me, because some of the times I like the slow, deliberate, methodical thing, like say in a Hitman game, but I much prefer let's get to the point and let's get through it. I feel like if I got into the right mood, I could see myself playing this game, but even as you were saying, oh, you have to figure out this little pattern, and oh, you have to figure out this, I'm not sure that the pacing really would do it for me, but you never know. I could totally be surprised by it and absolutely fall in love with it. It's something that I definitely wouldn't mind giving a try at some point. I think I got it free on PlayStation Plus, so for free, I will have no problem having a go at it sometime.
So don't misunderstand. When I say a pattern, I mean like as soon as you enter a building, you have to do all of these. You have to do maybe 15 actions in like under 6 seconds. So it's as much it's as much reflexes as it is puzzle. Don't let my saying it's a puzzle make it sound like you're playing like level 1 of Tetris or something. You really have to like keep on it, because as soon as an enemy shoots you, other enemies hear those gunshots and they come running. So you have to know exactly where to be when they enter the door, or you have to open the door on them to knock them out so that you can then, you know, hit them with the bat. So it's not like you're just killing an enemy, holding out for a second, going into the next room, and then waiting for something to happen. No, it's boom, 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 boom. You either die or you kill them. So even if you watch a couple YouTube videos, you might be able to see if it's for you. Look at some of the later levels that you might not remember, you know, have any spoilers for or anything. But I don't know, based on what you've said about like Mega Man 9 and remembering patterns and stuff, I think you might enjoy this one. So I'm not guaranteeing that you're gonna like it, but it seems to be something that might be up your alley.
No, we can only agree so many times in close proximity to one another.
I know. Hell's gonna freeze over otherwise.
Yeah.
But the soundtrack is amazing, and that's a lot of what kept me going, because there were many, many times during this game where I got really, really frustrated, and then I would respawn, and it would respawn with my favorite track playing, and I'd be like, all right, it's trying to tell me that I need to play this again, and then eventually I would finally figure out how to do it. So I was very proud of myself when I beat this game because I know how difficult its reputation is, so it was kind of a badge of honor because I'm not the kind of person, as I've said before, that really finishes hard games like this, and I played this well before Dead Cells, so until then I think this is probably the most traditionally difficult game I've ever beaten, so I had to throw it in the show as a little pat on my own back, so...
The badge of honor.
Exactly. And the sequel, I tried out, and I got stuck, which was weird. I didn't really ever get stuck in Hotline Miami that much, but there are a couple levels right at the beginning of Hotline Miami 2 where I just could not figure out what I needed to do to get through it, so I'm going to have to go back to that at some point and try to figure it out. And I didn't even play enough to get really familiar with the music, so not even the music was really helping me to get along. So, I don't know. I wish I can say more about the sequel to the game, but it does play very similarly. It's got a few differences, but I'm not sure enough how much it differs from the original one. But anyways...
Sequels can often be a struggle.
Yeah, exactly. So, that's about all I've got to say about that. Speaking of traditionally difficult games, you've got a good one coming up with one of my favorite composers attached to it. What are we going to listen to next?
We are going to listen to something that is absolute chaotic, difficult platforming madness, and that is the Battle of Little Slugger from Super Meat Boy. And I chose the version from the PC version and released in 2010, composed by Danny Baranowski.
Sweet.
Okay, and we are back. That was the Battle of Little Slugger from Super Meat Boy, composed by Danny Baranowski. And Ed, I am thankful to say that ever since I heard you talking a lot about how much you love his work, that I had to put this track in this episode. And it really helps that this game is just relentless. But it taps into what I was talking about before in terms of I feel like it's a very fair game. It introduces mechanics very slowly, gets you used to what's going on, and it feels really fair, although you will die a lot. Even when you're familiar with the game, you will die a lot because you get so many of these jumps that are near frame perfect, and you really have to buckle down and really get going to be able to master this game. But when you listen to the soundtrack that coincides with it, I feel like it is a major driving force to just keep you going, because no matter how many times I died on this first boss, this track just really kept me going. And when you look at the first 40 seconds of the track, and it's kind of like, okay, you know what, this is pretty good, this is getting into it, and then it just revs right up, and so does the intensity of the boss fight. It is just adrenaline adrenaline pumping, and it gets you really excited to push on through this fight.
Yeah, I appreciate this game for what it is. I think it distills side-scrolling action games down to almost like its purest form, and at its most kind of stressful and difficult. I think they did a really good job at just stripping away all the gimmicks that side-scrolling games are known for, and really just focusing on, here's a blob, and here are some spikes and some basic enemies, and we're just going to configure them in ways that are going to make you want to kill yourself. And
it's gonna happen.
And they
a
did
lot.
Yeah. And I meant in the real world.
Oh no, I know. I was resurrected several times completing this game.
I tried this game and it broke me.
As it does many.
Yeah, I know. I really like the soundtrack. I think I was just at a point in my life when I started playing this game where I just did not have the time or the patience. 2010 was the year I got married. My kid was 5 and was a handful. Yeah, I really didn't have the time back then. I was managing a Geek Squad department at Best Buy, which was a horrible nightmare job. So I don't think Super Meat Boy was going to be very cathartic for me at that
No, that
point.
was not going to give you those peaceful vibes like Hot Mine Miami were going to.
Exactly.
That previous track was going to totally get you like, oh yeah, let's chill with the world kind of thing. No, this was definitely going to just make you want to end it all. Like, it's brutal.
But, you know, the music is the thing that I really attached myself to for this game. And I think this was pre-Crypt of the Necrodancer, if I'm not mistaken. So
yes.
I'm trying to remember the order of music. So I was a fan of this one. I remember playing it, not digging the gameplay too much, but I did find the soundtrack for download. So I downloaded that and listened to the whole thing and fell in love with it. And then when I learned that Crypt of the Necrodancer was coming out and he was creating the music for that, I jumped on that immediately and then really enjoyed both the game and the soundtrack to that. So that's kind of how my whole fandom for Danny Baranowski's stuff began. But this is a great track to play if you're not familiar with Danny Baranowski, because it kind of exemplifies everything that he's really good at. It's like, is this a dance track, or is this a rock track, or is it somewhere in the middle? And it showcases his amazing handle on groove, but then it's got these fantastic melodic solos in the middle of it, and then it goes back into this really dark kind of chuggy atmosphere. So if you're turned on by this song and you listen to the rest of Danny Baranowski's stuff, you're going to hear a lot more of where this came from, and I think you'll fall in love just as much as I did.
Yeah, I appreciate that he can have such a diverse range with a ton of different genres in one song and keep that going, and they somehow blend into one another, and how consistently he does that with all of his music. Like, every time I listen to anything that he does, I am just totally there and eating it up. Like when I played Binding of Isaac, absolutely loved it. When he played the Cadence of Hyrule track in the previous episode, immediately was in love with it. Like, he is just an immensely talented person, and to be able to have it where you can compose tracks that you are going to hear for a very, very long time while you complete these levels and you still don't tire of them is really impressive, because the songs aren't particularly long given how much effort and time you have to put in to complete each of these levels and worlds. So I think it just shows what a talented composer he really is.
Definitely, and I think that's why he keeps getting tapped for these very musically oriented games like Crypt of the Necrodancer, because his music is so listenable, and so he's really good at creating music specifically to the specifications of the developers and making it his own and sound amazing on its own at the same time. So that's a unique quality that not many composers have.
No, when you listen to a Danny Baranowski track, like, you know it's his, much like when you listen to Tim Follin, when you listen to Jake Kaufman, like, it's very distinctly them. So the fact that they can compose very diverse tracks and all over the place for very different games, but still have a very distinct style in and of themselves that still weirdly match the game, that's super impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, ready to move on to our next track?
Absolutely.
All right, so this is It's got a lot of similarities with Super Meat Boy, actually, but a lot of differences too. So we're going to talk about Battle Kid, Fortress of Peril, coming up next. This is the track Skyward from that game. This came out on the NES in 2010, composed by the developer of the game, Sivak. Alright, that was Skyward from Battle Kid, Fortress of Peril. That was released on the NES in 2010, composed by Sivak. And this is a game that is only available in cartridge form for the NES. And they do still sell copies of it, so you can still pick one up. It is an unlicensed, obviously homebrew Nintendo game that's just as good, if not better, than a lot of the licensed games that are out there. Composed and programmed by one man who goes by the name Sivak. And I like his composition style. It's got kind of a... I think I've told this story on the show before, but I've got like an iPod music player that plays a whole bunch of NES sound files, and I put them on random. And every time a Sivak track comes up, I kind of like sit up and take notice because it sounds a lot like traditional, like Japanese or Western composed NES music from the 80s and 90s, but there's this like little like weird modern quality that it has to it that kind of makes me sit up and take notice. Like my ears perk up. I'm like, that sounds just different enough from a traditional NES track that I kind of think that it's not. And then I'll look at my phone and like look at the title and I'll be like, oh, it's Battle Kid, of course. I always do that with Sivak stuff. It's just, there's something weird about it that kind of like doesn't sound like anything else that's been released on the NES. I don't know if you got that just from listening to this one song, Dan, but that's always been like my thought process behind these pieces of music.
For this particular song, I didn't get too much of the modern aspect with it. I can totally see what you're saying with that, but I mostly got the really old school, like, I felt like this was a long lost, like, Double Dragon, Kunio-kun type track, just because of the little choppy bass notes that they use with those high pitches that follow. I think that they did a very good job with being really cognizant of trying to replicate that sound of yesteryear, but make it so that it's still a little bit fresh and not just pure nostalgia driven.
Yeah, I think he does. He uses a lot of techniques that a lot of the Capcom composers use and a lot of the Technos composers as well, where they're using these two square channels just slightly separated from each other. So it sounds like one instrument with a little bit of like reverb on it. and he uses that during like the B section in this song to quite good effect. But it makes me think of a lot of the older Capcom games that use that same stuff. And I think Sivak is a huge fan of those old, challenging games. So this game stars a protagonist named Timmy, and he has a pea shooter. He's like a little bit smaller than Mega Man. He runs through these giant, kind of almost Metroid-like levels, but each screen is extremely difficult. There are tons and tons of traps everywhere, sometimes traps that you can't see until you've actually walked onto the tile that the trap is. So it's like equal amounts memorization and equal amounts of just skill and reaction time for a lot of the enemies. Kind of hard to describe. There's checkpoints all over the map, and your objective is to collect all these keys that are all over the map and to get to the end of the game to unlock this door that's locked by all these keys. And it's rough, man. The only reason I really know that much about this game is because my buddies Joe and Todd, who I do Embassy exclusive with, will get together every once in a while, drink some drinks and snack some snacks, and try to get farther in this game. And there have been evenings where the three of us have taken turns trying to get 2 more screens farther in this game, and after 3 hours we're still just dying over and over and over again. And Joe and Todd are no slouches. They're much better at video games than I am, and it's rough. So sometimes we'll celebrate times where we actually get some progress versus the times where we're just kind of sitting there trying to get through these same screens over and over again. There's a lot of gameplay where you have to, almost kind of similar to Hotline Miami, where you need to do a whole bunch of different actions in very quick succession in order to get to the next screen. And if you are a millisecond off, you're going to end up dying because it's a one-hit game. So it's rough. It's rewarding when you get good at it, but in the meantime, you're going to find yourself listening to the same songs and looking at the same screens over and over and over again. I'm sure that's probably similar to an experience you've had with Super Meat Boy.
Yeah, most definitely. So this track and this game really sound up my alley. I think I have to give it a go because I have not experienced a game that I cannot beat. Sometimes they take a little while, but overall I am one of those people that will persevere, and there has not been a game that I have not been able to overcome. Not to brag too much, but I think I really got to give this a go. And it's sometimes, even if I'm not necessarily enjoying it, my sort of persistence and my stubbornness make me go through something so immensely difficult just to be able to say that, yes, I can do that. And it's an NES cart, so I won't even have an accomplishment or a trophy or whatever to prove it, just my own sense of satisfaction. That will be my badge of honor. So
that's true.
I think I will have to pick this up at some point and have a go at it, because I really, really like a good challenge. Sometimes I'm annoyed by cheap deaths, but I feel like if it balances out enough with that sense of reward, it can be a really enjoyable time.
Yeah, I think that this will be right up your alley. And if you enjoyed this one, there's a whole sequel to play too, which is even better and includes lots of new gameplay mechanics like wall jumping and conveyor belts and stuff like that. So as far as the actual way to get the game goes, is you pretty much have to purchase the NES cartridge if you want to play it. Most developers nowadays for Homebrew will also release a ROM that you could buy on their websites, but Sivak has so far refused to do anything like that. He did release a demo ROM of the sequel game, Battle Kid 2 Mountain of Torment, which you can find on his website, but to get the full game you actually have to go and purchase the full cartridge. So if you want to give it a try, Dan, you can always go download that demo ROM and just try out the first couple levels to see if the gameplay is something you can appreciate, and then move on from there. But I've seen people stream this and get very, very frustrated doing blind plays, and then I've seen people who can do easy speed runs, which just absolutely blows my mind, because there's just so much game to play. It's amazing somebody can remember that much. So I look forward to hearing your thoughts on this if you do end up picking it up, because like I said, I feel like this is a game specifically designed for people like you that are up for the challenge and have the skills to remember how to do everything that needs to be done.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to give it a go.
Cool. All right. speaking of challenges, I know all our games are challenging. Here's one of the most infamous challenging games out there. What you got next for us, Dan?
I have a track from Bloodborne, which is most definitely a very difficult game, and that track is Cleric Beast. It was released on PS4 in 2015, and it was composed by Tsukasa Sato.
All right, let's take a listen.
Okay, we are back, and that was Cleric Beast from Bloodborne, and that was composed by Tsukasa Sato. And I absolutely adore this track because this is the first boss that you fight in the game, and I think it really sets the tone for what it is that you're going to experience the rest of the time, with that really haunting vibe to it. And when you match this sound with the track itself with the sounds in the game, it really amplifies the both of them and really gets you into this fight and just makes it that much more intense, because as it's starting to slowly build up, you have this very loud screeching from the Cleric Beast that really puts a chill into your spine, and it is way at the other end of this bridge, and once you see it charging towards you, you're like, oh my goodness, what did I get myself into? What is gonna happen? And once the track really picks up and you hear those really loud thunderous slams and the screeches, like, it is just chill-inducing, it is haunting, it is just everything that I love in games and compositions, and is a total contrast to what we've listened to so far, but I totally eat this stuff up. It is just a phenomenal track for me and just hits all of the notes. I really like these haunting, creepy tracks, and this whole soundtrack is just filled with them, and I feel like it nails that really dark, creepy vibe.
Yeah, I feel like this would be a fantastic track to play, like, on loop, like speakers like hanging out of your window on like Halloween when kids are coming to trick or treat. Like, this would scare the bejesus out of them.
The whole soundtrack would.
Yeah, and it's kind of a shame for me because I love really dark gothic imagery like Bloodborne has. I love watching people play this game, but it's just way too challenging for the kind of game that I like to play. Like, I really gave Dark Souls 3 a good, honest shot because my buddy Todd is just such a big fan of everything From Software puts out, just like you. And he basically begged me to try it. And it was free on PSN Plus, I think, a while ago. So I ended up downloading it and giving it a shot. And I played for a while, and I was kind of getting into it. And then I played for like 3 hours one night and died because of a stupid mistake and lost all that progress. And at that point, I was just like, nope. Can't do it. I can't keep feeling like this.
Yeah.
So I ended up dropping it. And now I like I said, watching people play it, watching people who aren't necessarily like the best in the world play it, but I just like watching the character designs, looking at the levels as people explore them, and really just soaking in the ambiance of the game seems to be much more rewarding for me than actually playing it.
Yeah, the From Software games in this whole Soulsborne series is really a particular sect of individual that would really enjoy these games. I feel like there's no real middle ground as to whether it is that you do or do not play these games or not. You have the people who are just, I hate it, it's ridiculous, it's too hard, and then the people like yourself where it's like, I appreciate it, but it's not for me. And then there's this way on the other end of the spectrum where it's like, I adore this is the best thing, this is my life, this is me.
Yeah.
If you attack Bloodborne, you're attacking me, we're one with one another. And it's one of those games that you really have to get familiar with the mechanics of the game, and if you are not familiar with what invulnerability frames are, you are not going to enjoy this game. Like, it is just really tight in terms of the timing, but it's one of those experiences where once you get familiar with the mechanics, everything is your fault. Like,
right.
It is never on the game as to anything that happens, because these games are programmed so well and are so tight, which is impressive for such large, sprawling worlds that have a lot of elements to them. And the fact that it always feels fair to me is really impressive, because these are tough. I can totally see why people just have total rage quits with these, but there's something about the combination of everything that they just, for me, nailed the difficulty to that sense of reward just perfectly. And anytime that you get me going on to Soulsborne games, and now with Sekiro, I can just go on and on about how lovely they are. Don't worry, I won't do that here, but it's just something that I absolutely adore. And I think Miyazaki, the director of these games, does a wonderful job in the composers that he's been getting, particularly with these later titles. He really has cherry-picked these individuals who can really deliver sounds that will really enhance the gameplay experience. But the way that he directs and works with the games, he has a very, very specific vision. He's one of those very hands-on directors who he knows what he wants, and he's going to get it no matter what goes on. And so having a studio like Sony behind him really helps in terms of being able to get that money, because they back these types of projects, and it really shows the level of passion that everybody had working on this game, because it is a very tight, wonderful finished product. And I can't recommend it enough for somebody who likes a really difficult but fair challenge, because it's just really something. It's a sight to behold, and I can't recommend this game enough for those types of individuals.
I do really appreciate that these games exist, because it shows respect for the people that are willing to put in the time and effort to play these games. I mean, in the past, before like the Souls series, From Software was making games that were kind of building up to this. If you kind of look back on some of the older From games like King's Field and stuff, you can kind of see where they were leading up to.
Yeah.
But gamers who, like you, were really interested in a challenge with a cutting-edge technology game didn't have much to choose from. And the ones that you could choose from weren't made on a very good budget, so there were a lot of problems with them. And so this finally catches up to what the hardcore gamers have been demanding for so long. They want a really hard game that has a lot of content, that's gorgeous to look at, that's like butter on the ears. It just fits all of those buckets that everybody's been kind of clamoring for. And so I'm glad, and I'm glad that a great development company like From has been able to supply what people have been asking for all this time. I was a really big fan of theirs from the Echo Knight series. I don't know if you've ever played them. Some of the very earlier games, like on the PlayStation, Echo Knight was a first-person kind of puzzle game where you would just walk around and talk to people. They would tell you what their problems were, and you would have to kind of wander through a world and kind of solve them. And all these people were like ghosts, and you had to help them get into the afterlife. It was one of my favorite games on the PlayStation, and it was just so esoteric and so unknown, but so well done. And the Souls and the Bourne series are kind of the same way. They feel like they should be obscure, esoteric games, but for some reason they ended up in the mainstream. And I think that's just really, really cool that so many people can enjoy something that's just kind of so weird and dark, and it's like the Upside Down from Stranger Things, but all the time. You know, it's always dark.
Yeah, they're really strange. And I think the interesting thing about that is how the community, like you said, really did demand these types of games, and the community definitely has eaten these up, and it is a very intense community. Like the fierceness of the defense of these games is quite impressive, and whenever it is that you need a hand and you want to talk about these games, like, there is just a forum away where you are going to get some really passionate fans who have analyzed all the lore that's hidden so deep within these games, because there are multiple endings to them and there's a lot to really break down. You can just play them like you would like an old school NES game where it's just start to finish, whatever, I played a game kind of thing. But if you really want to get into the lore and experience why a boss did a particular thing, where they were and what was going on, and how these really creepy, weird, cryptic endings actually mean something a lot more deep and connect with everything before that, you have quite an intense community who really put a lot of time and effort to be able to understand Miyazaki's vision and what the rest of the team really wanted to present to the player, which is just, it's great to be able to see that level of commitment both from the developer and from the fans to really love this product and praise it as much as it really does deserve, because they are very well done, and this one in particular I absolutely adore.
Cool. Sounds like I'm interested in finding a YouTube video that kind of summarizes all this stuff so I don't have to walk through in 17 hours worth of gameplay to try to understand everything that's been going on. So but that's cool. The Cliff's Notes versions of the Souls series would be fun. Anything else you want to talk about before we move on to our next one?
No, I'm excited to see what this next one's about, because I don't know the song and I don't know the game.
All right, so this is getting into a few of my more unorthodox picks. This one is the main theme from the game The Room, and this one came out on iOS, PC, Android, Mac, and Switch starting in 2015, composed by Dave Newby. All right, that short little ditty was the main theme from The Room, which came out on iOS, PC, Mac, Switch, etc. in 2015, composed by Dave Newby. Now, okay, really, really simple, really short little tune, but this is technically the soundtrack to like 4 different games, and this is more of a motif, I think, because you hear this melody all throughout the game in several different ways. This is unfortunately really one of the only ways that I can get this music from the soundtrack on the show, because the rest of it's all unfortunately not able to be ripped. Anyways, this game, or series of games, started off as a puzzle box game. So the first one was a series of puzzle boxes that you had to solve. The game is completely three-dimensional, and it worked better on iOS, I think, or on the Switch with a touchscreen, because you would move things around with your fingers, and you could, open doors and such by dragging and tapping, etc., etc. But the puzzle boxes were amazingly intricate, and sometimes you'd get a small puzzle box on a table, but then you'd realize that the table was also kind of built into the puzzle as well. So you'd be finding hidden drawers, and then you'd find a gear that you had to fit into a different device, which would rotate in a certain way, and then you had to figure out how to match patterns to rotate the device just so to unlock other things, backwards writing and code that you had to disassemble and stuff like that. I really, really liked playing the first one and had a great time with it. And as Logan got a little bit older and started getting into watching people solving puzzle boxes on YouTube and learning about decoding, cryptic messages and stuff, I was like, wow, he's going to absolutely love playing The Room. So I sat him down one day on the couch downstairs with me. We booted up the game, and he just absolutely fell in love with it. It was so awesome just watching him dive in. And he's like 6 years old and solving these really complex puzzles. It's just the kind of kid that he is. So he and I, as a team, went through the next 3 games, all of increasing difficulty. And it's been such a bonding experience for the two of us, just kind of discussing what we need to do to solve stuff. Sometimes he'd solve it before me, and he'd kind of keep the secret until I figured it out, or vice versa. It's just a great experience to have with a kid. And I love that he is into these brain-bending games that's, it's a challenge for me, so I can only imagine how hard his brain is working when he's got a second-grade education, getting through games like this.
And he's solving the puzzles before you.
And he's solving the puzzles before me. He's got an engineer's brain. He's going to be very successful in that kind of thing when he grows up, I'm sure of it. But I love that I can entertain him for an afternoon and also kind of give him the spatial educational training that he just seems to want to get out of the media that he consumes. So I have no regrets buying all the games in this series and playing them. I don't know if you're into this kind of game or not. You seem to be more into like the kind of action games, but does any of this description kind of grab you at all?
It's really hard to say, because there are some of the times where I do like let's just go for a kind of like a puzzle, just chill out and figure this out and really use my noodle to think about that kind of stuff. But it takes a very special game to be able to do that. And I feel like if I had a similar experience where I was playing with my son and really kind of going through it like that, I would probably really enjoy it. But I'm not sure that I would pick it up just for myself. Yeah.
I kind of agree. I got the first one just because I think it was free, because the second game was coming out and they were kind of promoting the second one by offering the first one for free. And I was just really impressed. The graphics are just amazing. They're almost photorealistic. There's like dust particles, and all the surfaces have kind of a texture and a sheen to them. So it wasn't like those typical iOS games where somebody just threw a bunch of polygons together and is like, here, buy gems and give us money. This just had a genuine love and quality to it that you don't see on other mobile games. And the minute I saw the graphics and how everything moved together, I knew that the developers had a lot of love for this title and for this genre. So it made me want to see it through to the end to find out what happens. And as you go through these games, they get more complex. So it goes from simple puzzle boxes to now you're solving puzzle rooms in the second one. So an entire room will have pieces and parts all over it, and you kind of have to solve it to be able to escape to the next room. And then the third one, you have like entire buildings that are all kind of one giant puzzle made up of little puzzles. And so you're kind of going on an adventure through this building, solving things as you go. And they're really kind of expanding the scope of these puzzles every single time they release a new game. And it's really cool just to see how you can use the skills that you've developed on the previous games to help you get through the next games, but still having them be a challenge and coming up with new ways and new solutions to the same kind of puzzle that you've solved in other other games. So this is a great brain bender. It's great to just kind of relax. There's no time limits. There's no deaths. So you can really just kind of work on something and just sit back after a hard day at work and kind of use your noodle to try to solve a couple puzzles every time you boot the game up. So it's fun. It's good. It's great to work on these games with somebody because you can both kind of look at it and kind of put your heads together if you're not good at doing it yourself or you want to have kind of a team effort. So it's great to have that kind of cooperative atmosphere when you're playing a game like this. I think that's something that a lot of these challenging games don't include a lot of the time, is the ability to work with somebody to solve problems. It's mainly like a one person against the world kind of atmosphere in a lot of these games that we're talking about.
Yeah, most definitely. So I can appreciate when you have those moments where you can really have that cooperative experience because, say, when you talk about some of the more traditional games like the Battle Kit game that you talked about before, you can sit there in a room and you can have the other people look at what you just did and learn from that, but that only goes so far because a lot of it is based on the reflexes of that individual. So the subtle movements and the subtle button presses that you take are really yours and the other person doesn't get to learn that. Whereas with something, from the sounds of this, you both get to kind of learn and think about it at the same time. And I know that those types of experiences can be a lot of fun when you get to really sit down with somebody and really be able to go through a game and truly think about it like that.
Absolutely. So when your kiddo grows up, maybe this is something you might want to consider to help him get his spatial reasoning skills going.
I think I have a future engineer as well, so I'll definitely jump on that.
Awesome. And if you wish list this on Steam or put it on your eShop wish list for the Switch, this is the kind of game that does go on sale quite a bit, at least the first one. And sometimes the sales, you can get it for $1 or $2. So you're really not risking that much, even if you don't end up enjoying it. So throw it on the wish list, and then when it goes, on sale for like the Steam summer sale or the holiday sale that they have, it almost invariably will be discounted like 60 to 70%. So it's worth checking out one of those times.
Good to know.
So let's move on to your last pick of the show. What you got?
Okay, so this is from the most difficult game that I've probably ever beaten, and that is Ninja Gaiden Sigma 2, and the track is called Fluttering Danger. This is the PS3 version that was released in 2009, and it was composed by Makoto Hosoi, Ryo Koike, Hiroyuki Akiyama, and Takumi Saito. They're really hard when they're really close together for somebody who doesn't speak Japanese. Let's give it a listen.
All right.
Okay, so that was Fluttering Danger from Ninja Gaiden Sigma 2, and hopefully this time I will get the names a little bit more correct. So there was Makoto Hasoi, Ryo Kouki, Hiroki Akiyama, and Takumi Saito.
I'll take it.
Okay, we'll go with that. And I really like this track for two reasons. One, it's just a phenomenal track as it is, and two, it's a very effective contrast to the rest of the soundtrack. The rest of it is very, like, metal, like you're playing a Warriors game or something like that. It's just like the heavy guitars really chugging along, that heavy bass that goes along with it. And those are really good. But this one, I feel, is a great contrast because the boss is very different from the rest of the bosses in the game, and the music itself is very different. I love the kind of immediate reaction that you get from that, but how it keeps transforming and how you get a new layer that starts slowly fading in and then starts taking over, but then something else comes in to be able to kind of take over that previous melody that had come in, and how they're very different from one another. And like you'll get those drums coming in little bits here and there where it's like, here I am, I'm drumming and you're loving this and you're eating this up, but then it kind of fades and you get that more, those violins just really creating quite a presence to draw you in, and then that choir that fades in and out throughout the track really just it's just everything for me.
Yeah, it's like new flavors of danger every 15 seconds or so. And it reminds me of a cinematic battle scene where like two people are fighting, and every single time, you get knocked through a wall and suddenly they're in a different room and the music changes a little bit. And then a train whizzes by in the background and that creates like another instrument that comes in, and it just has that feel of things that are constantly happening and changing, but the level of stress is just either always there or always building, and it creates that level of tension so well. I think that, if I were playing this game and facing off against this boss, I'd just be like close to having a complete coronary meltdown just listening to this track.
Yeah, you will definitely have that because you were never safe with this boss. For me personally, not everybody agrees with that. There's a very small group of us Ninja Gaiden players who have actually beaten everything in this game on the Master Ninja mode and the Ultimate Ninja modes on the co-op mode. And we have varying opinions as to which one is the most difficult boss, but this one for me is definitely up there because there's a lot of the time with this boss where you just could not hit her, and it is very confusing the very first time you play with it because you jump in and you're like, yes, I dodged her and I'm ready to go, I'm gonna go in for the attack, and then you swipe and then she takes no damage and then she clobbers you and then you're dead and then you start again. Like there's a lot of guesswork with this boss in particular, and that's where I was really thrown off by that and really put this at the top of my list in terms of the most difficult bosses. This game overall is just intense. And for those who are familiar with it, it's a 3D hack and slash game that is just bar none in terms of its difficulty. Just to put into perspective the level of difficulty and the level of commitment, there are co-op missions that you can do online. You're not allowed to do them locally. And there are a couple of the challenges on the Ultimate Ninja tier where they're tracked on the servers, and myself with only a few thousand other people have actually completed them in comparison to the millions of copies that this game sold. So that just puts into perspective the level of commitment that you have to put into actually completing everything in this game. You can have a fair time and actually kind of enjoy it if you play on the easiest mentor ninja mode. Like, you're still gonna have a tough time, but if you really want to experience and master this game, like, prepare for hundreds of hours of really getting into it. And on top of that, you have to find somebody else who can play at that level too. And it took a while to be able to do, but it's once I beat Ultimate Ninja 2, it was probably one of the greatest gaming achievements that I've ever had, and that's why I had to put this track in here, because it just represents something that's incredibly difficult and just a monument in terms of playing difficult games for me. But it's also just such a pleasure to listen to.
Well, as you know, I'm close personal friends with Ryu Hayabusa, and I know he would be very proud of you, Dan.
Yeah, I've heard you two have met a few times.
Yeah, man. I've heard about these games. I like Team Ninja's work because I'm a big Dead or Alive fan. So I kind of follow the storyline a little bit because it kind of intersects with Dead or Alive. I know Ryu's a character in Dead or Alive as well. So I remember playing this on the original Xbox when the first Ninja Gaiden game started coming out, beyond the original NES titles. And I think we rented it, and my brother and I were like, what the hell? Like, we had no idea what we were doing. Like, it seemed like it was an action game, but we just couldn't figure out how to action properly. We just kept dying over and over again. And I think that just kind of turned us off to the whole series, because we'd read reviews for, sequels and remakes of that game, and everybody was talking about how hard it was, and we were just kind of like, oh, I don't really want to have to deal with that, especially from a rental level. Like, in a couple days, neither one of us are going to get good enough to really be able to see much of the game, so we always kind of avoided it. But it sounds like something that would be really fun to watch somebody play if they're really, really good at it.
Yeah, this is one of those ones where, when we were talking before about that, sitting down and watching somebody and saying like, wow, I can't believe they can do that kind of thing. This is one of those games that I feel like I can be at that level, and I will join the sort of top tier elites with it, because I've played hundreds of hours with it and I still haven't gotten tired of it. And I think a part of it has to do with when you wind up fighting a boss and you do something that's nearly frame perfect consistently. There's something about that sense of satisfaction of just like, whoa, look at me, I got my big boy pants on, let's do this, giddy up. Like, I absolutely adore that. And whenever it is that somebody messages me and says, hey, do you want to play this online? Like, I will drop everything that I possibly can and jump on that, because it's such a pleasure to play and such a pleasure to be able to say that I've really mastered a game that very few people out there have. It's something that is almost kind of near and dear in a really weird way, in terms of a sense of accomplishment for something extraordinarily difficult, because you don't hear many people talking about how, oh yeah, I beat Master Ninja mode, no problem. Like, that just doesn't happen.
Yeah, for sure. That's quite a feat. So would you consider this, so this is like, you'd say far in advance more difficult than any of the Souls or the Bloodborne game?
Yeah, I would definitely say it's more difficult when we're talking about the higher difficulties. The Master Ninja mode, the Soulsborne games do not stand a chance. Sekiro, in some ways, kind of comes close, but I think a large part of what happens with Sekiro is it does not play like a Soulsborne game. So anybody who's a major fan from Soulsborne games almost tries to play it like one of those games, and you're just going to get massacred, because everything about that game is how do you parry, and the dodging is nowhere near the same. So it's almost like you're breaking a lot of habits to be able to go through it. But even with that level of difficulty and that initial sort of learning hurdle, I really don't think they compare to the level of difficulty of Master Ninja and Ultimate Ninja, Ninja Gaiden Sigma 2.
Makes sense. Cool. That gives me a whole new appreciation for these games. I didn't realize, I knew they were hard, but I didn't realize they were like the pinnacle of difficulty and perfection, and that it demands that much from a player. So that gives me a new appreciation for guys like you that can get through this stuff. It's more attention to a game than I could ever pay. That's for sure.
I can totally feel that. You want to go to your Supreme God mode, Ultimate, let's do this.
Yeah. So speaking of time spent on games, I'm going to probably match you with this one. This next track is Desktop 1 from a little game called American Truck Simulator. This came out on PC in 2016, composed by Andrei Maciejka. All right, that was Desktop 1 from American Truck Simulator. That was released originally on the PC in 2016, composed by Andrei Maciejka. And this game's kind of a guilty pleasure for me. I don't really talk about it that much, but I am completely obsessed with it. And I love this music too. Just, based on his name, you can tell he's not an American composer. He's from Prague in the Czech Republic. I think for this game, he nailed American rock so well. He did the music for both this game and European Truck Simulator 2. They're both made by the same company. And European Truck Simulator has a very kind of Euro dance, very electronic kind of feel to it. And then he moved over to a much more kind of rock feel, but there's a little bit of electronic danciness in the background. But he made this sound much more authentic to American trucking, I guess. Dan, you said you expected a Dodge Ram to crash through the screen any minute, and I feel like that was kind of a really accurate representation of this music.
Yeah, and I was expecting the Marlboro Man to be sitting there smoking on a cigarette, have the cowboy hat and everything like that, just be like, hey, this is a Dodge Ram, you're gonna love it kind of thing. I don't know what cowboy sounds like that, but I think
that's good enough for me. It sounds kind of like Ryu mixed with a cowboy, but I can dig that. So this game is just like it says on the tin. It's you take the role of an 18-wheel trucker, and you are trucking around a simulated North America. And the maps are absolutely humongous. It's not obviously to scale for a real, I think it's 1/30th scale of the US, so it's still pretty big right now. So the developers started off with, I think, California and Nevada, and then every time they create a new state, they release it as DLC, usually pretty cheap. So you can get you can get Oregon, you can get Washington, they've got Utah. So there's this huge amount of West Coast America that you can kind of roll around in. And it's not only just driving trucks, it's also managing your own trucking company. So as you drive through these cities, you can locate truck garages that you can purchase, and then you hire on truckers and buy trucks for these truckers, and then they go out, and you have to keep them happy so that they'll keep getting good jobs so they can bring in extra income and make sure that their trucks are kept up. So the challenge behind this game isn't necessarily figuring out which invincibility frames you have to avoid so you can hit a boss. It's more just keeping your head above water financially while you're also driving this very accurately modeled big rig around the highways and byways and side roads of Midwestern United States, and making sure that your deliveries are on time, making sure that you're pulling over to the side of the road or finding a hotel to sleep at so you don't fall asleep in the middle of the highway, making sure you're gassed up, making sure that you've got, your tires aren't wearing down too much. There's so much to keep track of in this game, but at the same time, it's so realistically modeled that when you're sitting in this truck and driving down the highway, the world looks so realistic that you almost kind of can zone out and forget that you're actually playing a game. And it just looks like you're driving on a real highway. All the rules are the same. Everything's scaled, so exits are like where exits would be in real life. All the signs are accurate. It's a really cool, immersive game that you can take your real life driving skills and immediately know how to play the game.
I think that's what's interesting about these simulator titles is that they are a very cult type genre, and the people who do get into them, they really get into them. I've heard the train simulator ones and some of the boat simulator ones, and people really truly get into these, and I'm amazed at the level of depth of the mechanics and the level of care and attention to detail that they take when it comes to composing these intricate maps that they create to be able to create something that's almost like what you would emulate in real life. I find that very impressive. It sounds like everything I absolutely would hate in a game. I adore moments of contrast where you get to have this sort of where you're talking about how you kind of just get immersed in the game and you're totally zoned out. But I get that more from a game like Shadow of the Colossus, when you're on your horse and you get to slowly make your way towards the next Colossi, and then you have that contrasting moment of the big boss battle. That's one of my favorite game of all time. And to follow that is Last Guardian, where you have these brief moments of bonding and you get to know a little bit about Trico and the world around you, and then you have those intense moments. Whereas this just sounds like, okay, you're not getting to do anything fun. But I absolutely adore that people really do enjoy these games, and I love hearing about people who are really passionate about it, and the music that goes with it is actually surprisingly really good. I enjoyed the track.
Yeah, I think with this game, it's more of an escape than anything else. Like, driving down a highway is just really cathartic for me in real life, and kind of simulating that experience in a game where I can be sitting in my, air-conditioned room and just chilling out in my, pajamas, but also just kind of rolling down the highway. I don't know, for some reason it relaxes me a lot. There's a lot to manage going on with your trucking and stuff, but in between all that management, there's a lot of just highway and making sure that you're staying on your GPS route. And I don't know, I if you go on like YouTube, you can look up like crazy American Truck Simulator rigs, and you'll see people who have like taken dashboards from like real Mack trucks and like integrated it into their racing wheels, and like they have full like truck setups with like a 5-screen wraparound monitor in front of them, so they can like model the entire inside of a truck cab around their head. Like, they make it like a real truck as much as they possibly can, and spend thousands of dollars on these tractor trailer setups in their own living room. People go insane over this stuff. I actually just bit the bullet and bought a wheel for my computer so that I can actually drive a truck like, with a real steering wheel instead of just using a controller.
I was gonna ask if you were one of those people, because I love that people have that rig. I think that's fantastic. Somebody I know has one for the airplane stuff, where they have the joystick, they have all the different buttons and things that they need to do to be able to do the flying simulator, and I love that level of dedication.
Yeah. I mean, I probably would if I had the money. Obviously, you need a lot of room to do it, and you need a lot of scratch to do it too.
Yeah,
I feel like I'm pretty satisfied with the wheel. I do want to get a shifter eventually. It's another couple $100, but maybe in a little while. But I don't know. I enjoy it even more now, because now I don't even have to think about relating how I drive a truck to a controller versus real life. I can just pretend that it's real life and actually steer the truck around. And I don't know. It's just a weird feeling. It's a feeling unlike I get from any other game. And when I play it, all the stress goes away. I save all the truck management stuff for like the very beginning of my play session and the very end of my play session, and in the middle I just kind of forget about everything. You can put on streaming radio stations too, built into the game, so you can make it like it's a regular radio, so I can stream like my local like New Haven, Connecticut radio stations inside the game, so it sounds like it's coming out of the truck radio. So it does so much to make it seem like it's just such an immersive experience, and I have no idea how I got this into this game. It's not, I would never have expected myself like 5 years ago, if like current Ed went and talked to past Ed and was be like, you're going to be really obsessed with driving a virtual tractor trailer up and down the coastline on California. I'd be like, what the hell are you talking about? But here I am doing it anyway. So
yeah, I think the difficulty for this game for me would just be having a compelling desire to play it. That would be the most difficult part of the whole experience.
Yeah.
But the all this management aspect definitely sounds like it adds this layer of nuance that kind of, although you might want to have those moments of that immersion and that peacefulness, having those moments where you're contrasting it would make a little bit more of a compelling gameplay experience.
Yeah, I think the goals in this game more align with goals in real life versus video game goals. So like, for instance, with Ninja Gaiden Sigma 2, you've achieved the top spot. You beat the highest difficulty level. That's your badge of honor. You're proud of that. I'm proud of you for doing it, because it sounds almost impossible. With Truck Simulator, there's not a real end. It's more like in real life. Like if I really owned a truck company in real life, I would want to be able to sustain that and to see it grow. There would never really be an end game, except if I, retired and cashed in on all the money that I made. But in this game, it's just kind of similar. Like, I can pretend that I have a profession outside of my real life profession and that I'm successful in that profession. And I get that satisfaction of being able to manage my company and see it grow and that I can manage other people. And it kind of gives me the confidence in this virtual game that I could take those skills and possibly translate them into real life almost. So, I don't know, there's a satisfaction I get from that, I think, that's unlike the kind of satisfaction that you seek in games. And that's totally fine. It's just two opposite ends of the spectrum that we tend to operate on anyways. So, that all makes sense.
Yeah. The only parallel that I can draw that I could see, like, okay, I can totally get down with that is I've been playing the Dragon Quest Builders games, and we just got 2 recently, and that sort of, you make your own goals and you get to do what you want. I can totally see what you're talking about in that regard, and that's what I feel like is a big drive for the Dragon Quest Builder games, where there's no real end point after you start going into the build your own town mode. It's just when, you know what, I feel like accomplishing this, or I just feel like kind of getting in the groove, and whatever happens, happens. And you just have that sense of escapism where it's like, nothing in life matters, nothing in the game matters, let's just casually get through it and have a good time.
Exactly. And I think that's why Minecraft is so popular too. You can just sit back and go, hey, look at what I made. Isn't this cool?
Yeah.
And then you can go make something else over and over and over again. So that's all that I have for that. Man, this was a really cool show. I think I learned a lot, and I think you sold me on a couple games that I really do want to check out. Now, I definitely want to check out Pato Box. And I don't know too much about Super Meat Boy, but I don't know. There's a lot of games that I want to watch people play now that you've described the challenges involved in playing them. Like, I want to see people meet those challenges and get better at it. So I think you've given me more of an appreciation for people who chase after success in really hard games, whereas before I didn't really understand that mindset. So I really appreciate you coming on the show and like showing me that. So thank you.
Not a problem. Anytime. I loved being on. It was a lot of fun, and also to learn a little bit more about what makes you tick in terms of the games. I didn't think that there would be some actually hard games on this list, but you picked a couple ones that are kind of notorious for that, which is totally opposite from what we've talked about before in terms of what you go towards when you're picking what games you want to play.
Yeah, I got a couple tricks up my sleeve, and mostly I find them by accident. It's just like a game that I want to check out because it's been creating a lot of buzz, and I'll play like 5 minutes of it on like a friend's Switch, or I'll find a demo or something and then just get immediately hooked, like just something just clicks, like Dead Cells, for instance. And then I surprise myself when I end up getting really good at them. So I'm sure more games like that will happen to come across in the future. Maybe we can share our experiences with them as we go on. So as always, wrapping up the show, I want to thank Indira for the art and Trevin Hughes, aka Dread, for the podcast theme song. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/group/the VG Embassy and on Twitter at the VG Embassy. And I want to thank my Patreon patrons at the Taurus level: Cameron Childs, Michael Bridgewater from the Forever Sound version, our VGM series, Chris Murray, Chris Myers, Donovan Orofino, Ben the Dyad Dishman, Dave Parrish, Chris Steenerson, Jordan Worma from the Table to Stage podcast, and Volt Supreme. Our audio attaché members, Cameron Worma, Carlos from the Heroes 3 podcast, and Scott McElhone, and our VG ambassador, the patron saint of VGM podcasts, Alex the Messenger. And you guys look forward to this coming year of VG Embassy. We're going to have a whole bunch more blind listens. We haven't done one in a while, and I'm really jonesing to listen to some strange and unknown soundtracks. We've got Alex Messenger coming up with his Patreon reward episode, which we already know what it's going to be, and it's going to melt your face off. I'll just leave it at that. And then we're going to have a lot more cool guests. Dan, I had a great time. I'd love to have you back on. We got to come up with a new topic to talk about, but I'd love to have you back on soon.
I would love to. Have some topics already brewing.
Excellent. Let me know and we'll chat. All right, guys, so we will see you in 2 weeks with another VG Embassy. I'm pretty sure this is finally going to be that second volume of my favorite composer's solo show that I've been promising you for the past month and a half. So don't hold it against me if it's not, though. People surprise me with their guest appearances sometimes. All right, anyways, we'll see you next time, guys. Peace.